Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Connected with Eva. I'm so excited about today's episode. I met Janice 5 or 6 years ago in London, and although it took us a while to truly connect, today's conversation is absolutely worth the wait. I'm so happy to have you, Janice, on the podcast today, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, Eva. I'm really happy to be here, especially since we've known each other for a very long time and now we've reconnected and it feels like no time has passed at all. So my name's Janice. I'm half German, half Singaporean. To describe what I do is a difficult question because I feel like I've lived a lot of different lives. Currently, I work as a communications consultant in Berlin. I focus on venture capital funds. I work for a company called Piabo. But until a year ago, I was self-employed for many years. I was working part-time as a communications consultant, freelance, and also was working as a model. And that's how you and I met. And then prior to that, I had a few other things that I was doing.
I feel like I'm just so inspired to ask this first question because you've had so many careers that feel so different from each other. I wanted to ask about identity and what prompted each career path, and maybe also when it ended, what created the transition to the new path that you chose?
That's such a good question. And it's a question that I've thought about very often because, in the classical way that people think of their careers, they think that you should go from one step to the next. And for me, that somehow didn't happen. And it wasn't something that I planned. But in a way, I feel like my subconscious and my body told me where to go by step. And sometimes I wasn't willing to listen to my subconscious. So then my body took over. So to explain that, I started off wanting to pursue a very classical career path. I studied economics and international relations in St. Andrews. And basically all of my friends afterwards either went into political consulting or finance or management consulting. And I applied for all of those kinds of jobs. And even though I kind of knew that I didn't want to be a consultant, like a classical consultant, I had this ego at the time where I wanted to prove myself. I didn't end up getting accepted, although I got into like final round interviews for all of the big like McKinsey and all of those companies. But thankfully they rejected me, which then led to me still with this ego wanting to prove that I'm smart. So I ended up working at a hedge fund in London because I had this strange thing in my head where I felt I have to prove very like on an external point of view that I'm smart enough and that maybe I'm not just doing the job because I'm, charming or whatever. So I felt like being able to say I work for a hedge fund where only like super smart, quant brainy people work. I don't know. I think at the time I was so young and insecure. And in a way, it was a valuable job, but it wasn't for me and it wasn't aligned with my values and with what I really care about. But I wasn't aware of it at the time. I think it happens often when people are doing a job that's not aligned between their actual inner values and like the outer perception that they want to maintain, then you get sick and your body actually tells you that you have to change. And I was so stubborn. I didn't listen. I just ignored it. And I also pretended all the time that I was fine. And then at some point, my body was like, no, Janice, this is not happening. So I ended up having a proper burnout. I ended up having to quit my job, take time off, go to like a retreat and get therapy. And that really started like a kind of soul searching in terms of figuring out which factors matter to me and which don't. So that was the first transition, which was very much based on being stubborn, not listening to my body, and then having my body tell me. And I think it ties in very nicely into the theme of this podcast in terms of connection, because it is very much about being connected with your identity to your work, but also actually something that I've learned and I still struggle with, even with all of the other jobs that I've done, from modeling over to what I do now, over to some of the stuff that I did on the side, is identity and work. They're so intertwined, but they shouldn't be that intertwined. Like as humans, we have so many facets of ourselves and our career choice is one of them. But if we have like other solid feet to stand on, then if one of them falls away, we're not going to fall over. But when there's too much connection in your mind to what you consider your career, and then things don't work out the way you expect them to, then you're kind of in a risky place. So yeah, being connected to an intuition and to build connections within career, but also within family and friends and mental health and physical health. I think it's something that I've learned where being connected and being in tune with yourself is really, really important.
There's so many things that pop up. There's the corporate ladder idea that society promotes so much, that you start off at this place and then you have to grow and then you have to see an increase in financial means. You have to have a higher title every year and all that. And when you go to school and your teacher's like, so what do you want to do when you grow up? What career do you want to have? What do you want to work in that will give you money? Nobody asks you, oh, what's your passion? But okay, so this is your passion, but you're not going to make money from that, right? So it's all about things that will provide income in a very structured way as well. That's what education promotes. And actually, that's one of the reasons I wasn't very good at school at all. And I didn't like the whole education system because I'm not good with geography or math. I mean, okay, so if I study really hard, I'll be good at math, but I'm not interested in that. It doesn't pique my interest in any kind of way. And then I thought I was not intelligent in that kind of, academic way. I'm not meeting these standards that are required from society. They're so well accepted. They're so normal that even when they're questioned, you still have to have a career, you still have to have a 9 to 5. And if you're in your mid-30s, you have to be very well established, because if you're not well established, you failed in some way. But if I want something else, or if I change my path and I need to start from ground zero again, I'm a failure, right? Because that's not how you're supposed to do it.
I think there's so much expectations that come upon us from our environment, from our families, from our peers, where it's quite hard to break out of that, especially because in some way you know that you need to earn money to survive. And then one of the sad things about much of the creative industries is that they're kind of known to not be very well paid. And that means that I think many people corner themselves into a box that they don't really fit in. And then, as you say, you get depressed or you feel inadequate, or you overly discipline yourself to just make it work. That was my case. I ended up very good at school, even though I hated math as well, but I just pushed myself and I got tutors, and then I worked in finance. So I had to use a lot of math and it was uncomfortable, but I had this attitude of, if it's uncomfortable, then you're going to grow. But it was so harsh and it was so controlled. And that I think leads to this disconnection between yourself and what you actually, is in you. But yeah, I mean, in the end, to get back to your initial question, all of the transitions, they kind of happened by coincidence. And every single time I felt like a failure. Now that I look back, every single life and experience of my work or of my personal development, every single one, even the ones where I felt like I was this small on the ground, it brought me growth and knowledge. But it's one of these things that you see only in hindsight. And when you're in it, you feel like you've totally screwed up. And then you look at people your age and you compare and you're like, oh my God, they've stayed in the same job and they've gotten promotions. And now, they're going to get married and have a baby and they've bought a house. And you're like, well, I live with a flatmate and I don't know if I can afford dinner. So, I think one of the biggest dangers is really this comparison. And I have a wonderful friend, actually two wonderful friends who I mentioned to you. They actually also both have podcasts. And one of them, her podcast is called The Slowdown. Her name's Tiana Tamburic. And she basically talks a lot about how do we define success for ourselves and how do we redefine success and how do we slow down to fundamental things. And then the other one, her name is Sarah. Both of them are former models, actually. And Sarah is a nutritionist who's built this amazing community called Live Well, Be Well. And she does very much focus on holistic well-being over nutrition and mental health, but she talks to scientists and top experts of the world. And she also had something like this with like a complete burnout of like her body shut down. She had to completely change her path. And she was one of the main models for Burberry at the time. And then her body was just like, nope. And that brought her to also consider these root pillars of well-being. Human connection is such a big part of that. And I think having friends who also doesn't follow this very structured classical path, it helps you feel less alone. So the way that modeling started actually was also very random. I was scouted a few times when I was younger, but I was like, oh no, like I will never model. Like, no, I'm going to go to university and then I'm going to get some fancy job and like be a businesswoman. In the end, after the burnout, I took a year to just do a couple of things that were good for the soul. So I worked with an NGO in Vienna, working with the refugee camps that were being run by big organizations around the world during the refugee crisis. And then I volunteered for Human Rights Watch. And then I went back into communications consulting at a big company called Brunswick, crisis communications and reputation management and like pretty heavy stuff. And after half a year, I was like, okay, I think my body is already telling me that this is not made for me because it's all very negative. Like you're basically trying to fix a difficult situation instead of what I do now, which is communicating innovation and like ideas about the future. So I left that job and then I started freelancing and I was basically just writing for friends, like for their startups, supporting everything from like writing the words on the websites to like writing captions on social media to like making a marketing plan. One of the companies I was working for was this app for models and influencers called Into App. And yeah. So that company, I was basically doing a bit of communications work for them. I was also like helping build their business in Munich, and it was quite fun because I got to go to like restaurants and bars and gyms and explain the concept and get them to sign up and make a subscription and then create offers for the models and the influencers to be able to go and, eat the food, promote the brand, but like try to do it in an authentic way. But it was a startup and it wasn't funded externally or not much. So they couldn't really pay very well. One of the investors in that startup was a lady who was the head of a big modeling agency. The founder of the startup said to me, Janice, I can't pay you more, but you could consider, if you want, to model for this agency, Munich Models. And at the time I didn't know, but it's one of the best agencies in Germany. And then I went in and I was like, hi, I guess I'm here to do the open call. They were so receptive to it and they signed me immediately. And I was like, oh God, what have I done? Like, this is so bizarre. But it turned out to have been a good choice. Then through modeling, I basically met this amazing community of people, like models who weren't just models, like yourself, who are doing other stuff along the side. But they have this freedom to do that because they're not so bound by these expectations. Because as a model, you're already like kind of a unique case. And on one hand, you have freedom to do your own stuff. On the other hand, you don't have freedom if you have an agency and they keep on controlling your time. I mean, you and I met at a wonderful event about how models can take back their rights a little bit more. That was the first time that I gained the sense of community of people who have all chosen a career that's really not conventional, but who are also not just a model, but like super smart people who happen to be models along the side. So yeah, total coincidence. But that led to so many other things that then led to me being where I am now, because then I realized a lot of problems in the fashion industry, like late payments and, just the very bad conditions that many of the contracts have, that you have with the agency, that you sign over your right of attorney, or like, you get booked for Fashion Week and then you get stuck in a model apartment with tons of people and, they still charge you tons of money. And then you do a big shoot and you like have a campaign out there, but you're not getting paid for it until like months later. Or you've done a campaign and you just get paid for the day rate. And then there's the actual payout with the usage and the buyout. And then like maybe the brand decides to not publish it, or maybe they decide to just publish it in a smaller market. And then you're trying to plan your budget and you're thinking that you're going to get this payment, but you don't know when. And then you actually don't know how much. And then on top of waiting for ages, you're giving so much commission to the agency. And it's just crazy. And from the outside, it looks so fancy.
Why is it also that modeling has the highest commission out of everything, out of art, acting, real estate, the highest out of everything? I don't know.
It's crazy. To be honest, I think it's just a very exploitative system that was set up on the basis of the fact that most models are very young and they have a big dream. And firstly, they're not told how unlikely it is to be really successful as a model. So they think they have a chance. Then they sign a contract, sometimes even in a language they don't properly understand. And they certainly don't have any legal knowledge. And sadly, a lot of these agencies took advantage of that. So then it kind of became almost like a cartel between the leading big agencies of the world to take a set amount of commission. The biggest issue is that as a model, you really aren't supposed to complain about things, because then they're like, oh, you're so replaceable. If you're going to be difficult, then we'll just take someone else. And that's just insane. And then on so many of these shoots, also, you don't really get treated like a human. And my friend Tiana said it so nicely recently in a podcast. Actually, she was like describing the feeling on a shoot where she might have like an input on like the art direction or the creative. And now she's actually a producer herself. So she's clearly good at it. You know, if she was going to give feedback on a shoot, then the team would be looking at her like, oh, the clothes hanger is trying to talk, like make her shut up. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues.
I feel like I mostly do commercial, which is because I like it more. Fashion is just so much like your clothes hanger.
Commercial is a bit nicer and like you get to actually smile, which is quite nice.
All the time.
But then you smile so much that your face hurts.
It's funny that when I was 15, there was this funny school production where I played Barbie. You know the song, the pop song? I don't remember what it's called, but basically I was like this, smiling for 10 minutes. And that was my
my God.
So I've been smiling performatively ever since I could remember. But yeah, I mean, obviously, even in commercial and in everything, really, there are problems, but fashion so much more for sure.
Yeah. But isn't it funny how, like, if I look back now at modeling and the skills that I think models gain by having worked in this crazy industry, there are so many skills that are applicable. One of the ones that is useful to me these days, but also it's kind of a strange one if we're thinking on the topic of connection, is what you just said. Like, so you know, smiling performatively for a big chunk of your life. And it means that you can maintain a presence. In one hand, it's very useful. You know how to present things, you know how to present yourself. You also kind of become a pretty good salesperson because you basically are your own product. Right now in the world that I'm working in, the startup world, with investors and with founders of startups, there's this whole movement in communications that's all about personal branding. You know, everybody wants to have a personal brand and they want to be known as an expert and a thought leader on a specific topic. And then they might hire a communications agency like ours to help them build a personal brand. So that could involve writing posts on LinkedIn. It could involve getting them placed on stages at conferences to speak on certain topics, or be interviewed on podcast, or be interviewed in the press. And then you have all of these different factors that lead to creating a personal brand where you're known for your area of expertise. And as a model, you are a personal brand from the beginning. And I think especially in our generation of models, like social media kind of became a thing. We ended up having to maintain a personal brand. And I remember when I signed with Munich Models, I had my private Instagram account that had like pictures of my family and like my friends. And they're like, oh, you need an Instagram for modeling. And like, you have one, so just use that one. And I was like, no, there's private photos of my family. I'm not going to publish that. And then they were like, oh, but then you're going to have to build up your followers from scratch. And I was like, I genuinely don't care about my followers. You know, if you need me to have like a little online portfolio on my Instagram account, I will create a new one. So I did. But personal branding, every model that does take a bit of emphasis on that aspect, which we have to because we always have to be present and like have pictures and show that we're there and doing stuff and like keep on top of people's minds. It's personal branding in a nutshell, and your personal brand is you. The sad thing and the difference between the clients that I work for now in my like PR and communications job is that as a professional in a business context, your personal brand is based on your expertise. As a model, your personal brand is based like on your face.
I mean, I went to a casting last week, and I think it's the agency that has my Instagram, because obviously I don't give it to the client. Well, they watch my stories afterwards. It's a decision maker, people. That puts a lot of thought into what you present. Obviously, my Instagram is completely professional, but sometimes on stories I get a little personal. Not personal to a level where it's actually super authentically me still, because this happens, clients will see it. It's all polished materials and it's a brand.
I find it funny sometimes when there's a person that I don't really know. And like, I don't have a lot of followers. And the funny thing in my modeling career was, even though I had a couple of really big jobs, jobs were never in the same country where I was. So they were like big pictures on like billboards and buses and things, but I never saw them. So it just kind of felt like it would happen to somebody else. And I never really connected with that. But like, I would have like friends in New York or like in Dubai or Hong Kong, like sending me pictures of me on a billboard, and they would like do a selfie and do like a haha thumbs up. And it was just kind of weird because it still didn't feel like it was me. But then sometimes, I'm also quite bad at remembering people's names and faces sometimes. And then people are like, oh yeah, oh, you look so familiar. And I'm like, do I though? Are you sure? It is quite funny. I think modeling, like, not only does it teach you how to have a personal brand and how to present things and how to sell things and how to sell yourself, it also teaches you to work in a team. And you work so intensely in a team on a shoot, especially if it's like a few days on location. And you have to understand the vision of the creative director. Then you have to like collaborate well with the rest of the team. Then if you're working with other models, then you have to work together. And in the end, you build this wonderful bond. The shoot is over and you might never see each other again, which is really sad. But I think it teaches you a lot of teamwork, a lot of collaboration, a lot of patience. You've got to have a very thick skin, and you have to be quite impervious to criticism, because otherwise, if you took every criticism to heart, then you would just be sad all the time. And like, the types of things that people say are just, if I tell my friends who are never been in this industry what the agency might say if you come in for measurements or Polaroids, or even like if they want to place you with a new agency and then the new agency gives some kind of a feedback where you're just like, wow, this is so inappropriate. And any other industry, it would not be okay. But in modeling, it's like, oh, we like her look, but tell her to come back when she's a bit more in shape. Or like, oh, she looks great, but like, her hair is so heavy that it makes her chin look really big. Like, can you like change that? Or even on a shoot where you're like, you're doing your thing and you're trying to do what the team wants. And then the client is looking at the screen and you're like, you have like 30, 40 people surrounding you. And then there's the client team looking at the screen and they're like, no, there's something is off, like not quite happy with it. And then you're like, okay, what do you want me to change? Give me some feedback. And they're like, I don't know, just, try something else. Yeah, it's weird.
Clients not really, a lot of the time not knowing what exactly they want. Also the whole collaboration, it's because it's a photographer, it's a makeup artist, hair, it's you, it could be props, it's so many things intertwined. So it's not even that you can specifically do something.
Yeah, that's true. It's like a combination. But it happens in my current job as well, working with clients, especially if we're doing like the strategic side of things, coming up with a concept for a brand or for a client and coming up with wordings, or coming up with, ghost written content that builds on their personal brand. Often they won't know what they want until they see it. So then you have to give them several options and then they can choose the one that they like, but they don't know in advance. So I guess that's kind of a thing that I've learned through modeling, that it always has to be like an iterative process and the client doesn't necessarily know what they want. And then I guess it's all about presenting options and then choosing the right one. And I was recently reading something about AI and how many of the things that we used to do will change with AI. I mean, modeling industry, a lot of e-commerce, I think, will be taken over by AI. But I also think that as more and more things become AI powered and digital, life online, I think there will be a lot more interest in real life, in person, brand experiences, like a spectacular show, kind of a fashion show, or like a trunk show, these kinds of things. I think people will care more. And you, Booker, actually, Claudia, the founder, she said something similar. She was like, other founders might think, so they're modeling and creatives booking platform, as you know. And they also have like a fintech. So they do like a buy now, pay later with the client so that the model doesn't have to wait for like 90 days minimum to get paid. They can get paid within 10 days because they have like a financial intermediary between the client and the model that covers that waiting time. And also, instead of taking between 25 and 60% commission like a normal agency, they just take, I think, 10 or 12. So it's a good concept. And Claudia, she said, founders facing AI and working in the creative industry might be terrified, thinking that if e-commerce gets covered by like AI generated models in the future, then the entire business concept is no longer viable. She was like, actually, no, because people will care more about in-person and real life events. And that kind of human connection will matter even more than before. So we're not worried. We're just adapting. And I just love that attitude.
The more you're interacting digitally with something that's not real, the more you crave real interaction.
And we go back to connection again.
Of course.
Like everything in life.
Connection is so important. And, in terms of this conversation, I love the connection to yourself and your identity. And going back to the beginning of the conversation, when you were talking about the body and that feeling, I just think that's so important because I had something like that. And it was a personal experience. So it might not have been a career, although it was also career because I was stalling and not progressing and not doing anything. And on a personal level, I wasn't happy. So I got all sorts of physical problems. I had a benign tumor. I had,
Oh, God.
I had a lump in my breast. I had everything that you could have.
Oh, I had one of those too. It's scary. Did you get it removed?
When they were trying to diagnose it or check what it was, I think it kind of burst. I don't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it was all good, but I was getting all these physical symptoms, bad moles and everything. It was because I was in a place in my life where I was refusing to listen to my body. I knew I wasn't where I wanted to be, but I wasn't doing anything about it for years. I wasn't doing anything. And when you do that, when you betray yourself like that, your body protests. It's gonna kick you, be like, listen, you're not listening. You're not listening when I'm speaking really gently to you. So here's a kicker. I'll kick harder until you stop and, take a decision to take life in your own hands once again. So
isn't it kind of amazing that our bodies do that for us? I think one of the best and very difficult things to learn in life is to become better at listening to that before things get so bad. I still struggle with that. Like, I'm very stubborn. So if my body's trying to warn me, I'm just like trying to power through. But it would be so much better to listen sooner. And it's something that I'm trying to get better at. But it's hard. And listening to one's body and intuition and gut feeling and like little warning signs, it's so important, but it's really not easy.
It's so fascinating as well because the body always knows before the mind has had time to process things because it knows what your soul desires. And I think that's where it comes from. It knows what your soul really is connected to authentically. It knows the real you, the one you might be so detached from yourself. Hopefully not, but
Yeah.
could be so detached. Your body still knows. Your body still knows where you want to, and it's pushing you in that
True.
direction. But the further away you are from where your soul wants to be, the more painful it is, because
Yeah.
you need to get to that stage. And if you're far and if you're
Yeah.
refusing to accept where you want to be, it is really painful. And then you start
Yep.
getting all sorts of symptoms and diseases and being depressed, and life could get really bad unless you become aware and wake up.
Having more awareness on the connection between the mind and the body, and thinking of it in like a holistic way rather than being two, separate forces.
Yeah.
I think is one of the nice things about like Asian or like Eastern medicine is that the body and the mind are seen as more of an integrated thing, whereas in Western medicine, it's kind of more separate. But I think that's changing, thankfully. Like things have improved. Yeah, it's really interesting and important and complex. But in the end, maybe it doesn't have to be so complex. It's actually quite simple. We just make it complicated.
If you're in a situation, for example, where you start feeling really anxious, the most holistic way to resolve it is like, okay, my body doesn't like this. Maybe not every single situation that makes you anxious, but things that make you uncomfortable and where your body starts protesting. So the way to react would be, I remove myself from the situation, or I take a step back, or
Yeah.
not, or let me just push through here and just keep digging myself into the ground for no reason, because my body's telling me no. So there's no reason to be here, but let's just keep being here.
I know. It's so crazy.
I try, and recently I find myself much more relaxed about how things happen. But one of the things you need to really trust, right? You have to have a lot of trust in the process and in
Yeah.
in the fact that things will get to where they need to be. It's scary sometimes, right? Because it means you have to almost release all control. So it's like, no, I trust that
Yeah.
I will get to where I want to be. And if something feels really uncomfortable and my body's really struggling and telling me all these things, I'll move on from the situation because I trust. And I feel like we as human beings,
Mhm.
we do suffer with trust issues a lot, and we don't really, because there's this very strong feeling of control. We want to control things. We want to control we want to control our lives, obviously. So we want to control the narrative
Mhm.
we're creating, the path we're taking. It's like, exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm going to step here, and this is where I'm going to step, right? So I have control over
Mhm.
that, right? But it's all just imaginary because we don't really have any control.
Yeah. It is so crazy. I think over time, if we see kind of the positive effects of stepping back and letting go of control, and we see that it actually does lead us in the right way, and as we learn to trust our gut more, then it becomes easier. But it's so hard. I mean, I think my New Year's resolution for the past many years has been trust your gut feeling more. Also, like use the snooze button less, but that's a different story. But it's hard. It's really hard. I think it helps if, the process is accompanied with like a process of self-reflection and, coaching, therapy, these kind of things definitely helps. But yeah, it's not easy at all.
We make our life so much more complicating. Like how you say, you start off with this idea that
Mhm.
career has to be a certain look, and by a specific age, you have to have a certain image completed. Like
Mhm.
I have this sorted out by this age, and then it's almost like an equation, right? But life is not math.
Thank God it's not math. I don't know. I think it's just dangerous because we compare ourselves with other people and we look at what our friends are doing and then there are things that we always thought that we wanted, like getting married, having children, having a career, like I don't know, having a house. And then life takes you in a different direction. And then it's really hard to understand it until later on when you realize that, maybe something didn't work out because another thing was going to come and it was much better for you. But in order for you to even appreciate how much better it is for you, you have to have gone through the thing that was not good for you and that it didn't work out.
That's a good ending point here. Any failures we've had in life are learning experiences, and we need to
Yeah.
celebrate failure.
Yeah. And maybe to just not call it that.
Yeah.
Or to not have it have such negative connotations, like learnings.
You don't learn without that stepping stone. You thought something and you learn better. And then you have a whole different appreciation and understanding of life, which is how you grow as a human being. So let's reframe failures as learning. Love that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you one last thing. What would you tell people who want to work on their personal branding? And what would you say is one thing that you need to really consider, maybe?
I actually think that, and this might not be the standard type of advice, but there are two things. One of them is that no matter what it is you're doing, it has to be authentic. Your audience will feel if it's not authentic. I'm also not a big fan of people using ChatGPT to write all of their posts and captions. As we touched on before, like the more we have AI and digital stuff, the more like human connection and authenticity becomes important. And people can feel it. They can kind of smell it if you're inauthentic. So that's one side. And like, I wouldn't even say over engineering it, just being quite authentic. And as we were saying, like maybe even openly discussing when things don't work out so well so that your life and your brand isn't like this perfectly curated highlight reel. Then on the other hand, and that's just more of a like, because nowadays we build brands on the internet and algorithms look at stuff, it's very important to be consistent. So I think a lot of people get overwhelmed by that idea to consistently be present. But it doesn't have to mean that, you have to do some in-depth article, thought leadership piece or like, beautifully curated photo selection every time. It's enough to just do something very small, but to do it on a consistent basis. If you don't, then like oftentimes all of the efforts that you put into building things up in the past then kind of gets lost because of the way these algorithms work. So consistency and authenticity, I would say.
I love that. And thank you so much for speaking to me today. Thank you.
It was so fun. Thank you.